I actually have a PhD and two masters.
Wow.
De- yeah, I have a PhD and two master's degrees. And actually, something that's interesting about that is because I was growing up in so much chaos, I would say,
Right.
um, I didn't really pay attention to my academics at all
No.
because nobody was really looking after, me or kind of paying attention. So during elementary school and half of high school, I literally would get horrible grades. I didn't pay
Right.
attention to my academics, and I didn't even know that I was intelligent, to be honest with you,
Right.
because I just never tapped into it. I went to a school in sixth grade, actually. It was a very, very small, nurturing school. And the administration, because it was so small, you could have one on one attention. But that was the first time that I tapped into my intelligence.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on The Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people from around the world that are wondering, okay, I know where British Columbia is in Canada. Where is Prince George? Well, it's about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our European friends, 800 kilometers, and it puts us physically in the middle of British Columbia. East to west, north to south. So today, very special guest. Her name is Michelle Madenberg. Sorry, Michelle. I just want to make sure I say it right. Michelle has a very, very interesting bio, very interesting background and practice. She maintains a private practice in Harrison, New York. She's a co-founder of and a clinical director of Through My Eyes, a no-profit organization. And then she is also an author of a book, and she will tell us all about that. So, Michelle, give us a bit of your background and bring it up to where we are today.
Sure. So when you say background, what would you like to know about me?
So where were you born, and then where did you go to school, and and how did you get to doing what you're doing today?
I was born actually in Brooklyn, New York,
Right.
and lived in the five boroughs growing up. I say this because it definitely formed me into who I am today, but I went to five different elementary schools. That's a
Oh,
lot of school. Yeah.
why?
Yeah, most people are like, wow.
Yeah.
Why? My parents were divorced since I was 3 years old, and there was a lot of moving around back and forth. So, unfortunately, it amounted to me going to five different elementary schools. And you know what it's like being a young kid and having to reinvent yourself over and over and over again and always being the new kid.
Yeah.
It's quite challenging. Yes, a lot of
Yeah.
adversity. So
Right.
that was pretty interesting. I also grew up, four of my grandparents, all of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors.
Okay.
So, and most of their families were actually, murdered in the war. So a lot of like intergenerational trauma, which you could imagine how that impacted my life as well. Um,
I'm trying to find the name Maidenberg. Now, I was born in Holland, and I was kind of looking at your name, and I thought, could possibly be Dutch, Belgium, maybe even Denmark, something along those lines.
so all of my grandparents at the time, Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia. Okay.
Czechoslovakia. Yeah. Of course, they emigrated to the United States, but that's where they were born, all of them.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Um, so I was always, I think, from when I was a young child, I was always interested in helping people. It just came naturally to me, and I was I'm an empath, which I don't know if you know what that is, but I really feel feelings on a very, very deep level. And when somebody experiences, very intense feelings, I literally feel what they feel, so my feelings on the spectrum are pretty intense. So when I feel, sad, angry, passionate, love, whatever it is, it's to a really intense level.
Yeah, I didn't
Um,
know what it was, but like for me, I relate to people emotionally, and obviously because of my own background, I've gone through a lot of stuff in my life, and I can relate to emotions. I'm not sure if that is in the category of being empath or not. You know?
uh, yeah. Well, it's again, it's feelings on a very intense level,
Right,
and it could be very exhausting sometimes, right?
right,
Because you carry a lot. You carry a
right,
lot with you,
right,
and things affect you emotionally all the time, also.
right.
So because of my personality and what I went through in life and adversity, and I think that, particularly my grandmothers had I didn't realize it till recently, actually, what an impact they had on me, more than I realized it. I think as I've kind of gotten into adulthood, it's clearer and clearer to me. I think, they used to tell me stories, or one grandmother particularly used to tell me stories when I was very, very young. And again, you hear these stories and, she repeated herself over and over again. But I didn't realize how deeply compassionate I felt for her and, what she went through. And I realized that, I naturally fell into the role of helping people, and also just, I was always very emotionally mature. I always got along with people older than me. I always gravitated towards people older than me. I always had friends that were older than me. I have friends of all different ages, actually. So it just kind of came naturally to me, and
Right.
I feel like it's interesting. I think I used to say this, and I find it fascinating. I used to say, oh, anybody could really do the work that I do. It's just a matter of, having persistence and et cetera. But I realize, of course, more and more that there's a certain intuitiveness that you have to have, you know, um, which I feel like I have, and not everybody obviously has that.
Right.
So I appreciate my skills more and more, as the days pass, and I love everything that I do. I write. I'm an author, and I love writing. And the reason I love writing is because it reaches people, and it touches people, and that just moves me all the time. And it's a passion, actually, that I also connected to very recently. Because I have a lot of gaps in my education because I went to so many schools. You can imagine, it makes sense. So I never really connected to this, creative outlet or strength of mine until a number of years ago. So that's been pretty amazing also. And I also realized that, I just in terms of strategic thinking and processing and problem solving is something I think also that's very mature because I've had to do that since I'm a little girl. I've
Exactly.
always had to I've always had to be a step ahead. I've always had to be like planning things to make sure that I was safe, just everything and that also comes with also needing to always be in control,
Yes.
you know? So that's the part of me that had to grow. The part that could allow myself to be imperfect. The part that could allow myself to just be. That doesn't come easy to me.
Did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
So, yeah, I had, well, from my two original parents, I did have a brother who was 16 months younger than 13 months younger than I am. Um, and then I also have a half sister from my father's second marriage who's 15 years younger than I am. So, and I grew up with three stepbrothers. So again, my father remarried, I had three stepbrothers, and then he subsequently got divorced again. A lot of changes
I would
and
say.
transitions. Yeah, a lot of transitions in my life for sure. So it's been an interesting journey. I could tell you that. And like I said, I really love what I do because I really have a mix of what I do. I write, I teach also. I teach at NYU.
I saw that,
I
yeah.
have a practice, which is wonderful. And then I also have a YouTube channel where I do weekly guided meditations as well. I publish guided meditations every Thursday. So it's a little bit, I love it because I'm doing a lot of things and I'm always keeping myself informed and interested and like alive, and passionate.
So most of your experience or life experience not acquired through teaching or going to schools so much, but more your
wouldn't say that.
life. Okay.
I mean, I think it's a mix. I actually have a PhD and two masters.
Wow.
De- yeah, I have a PhD and two master's degrees. And actually, something that's interesting about that is because I was growing up in so much chaos, I would say,
Right.
um, I didn't really pay attention to my academics at all
No.
because nobody was really looking after, me or kind of paying attention. So during elementary school and half of high school, I literally would get horrible grades. I didn't pay
Right.
attention to my academics, and I didn't even know that I was intelligent, to be honest with you,
Right.
because I just never tapped into it. I went to a school in sixth grade, actually. It was a very, very small, nurturing school. And the administration, because it was so small, you could have one on one attention. But that was the first time that I tapped into my intelligence. I thrived because people paid attention to me and they gave me support. And then I was like, oh my goodness, like I was actually one of the best pupils in school because of really finally recognizing that I was intelligent. But I
Right.
didn't know that before. I really didn't believe that. So once I tapped into that, and again, I said since I was a little girl, I said, this too shall pass, and I'm going to have a life of my own.
Right.
And I'm going to cultivate a life that's going to be thriving, and this too shall end. And I really believe that. And I really tapped into that. And I did. I went from school to school to school, literally. I got my PhD right out of college, went for my master's right after my master's program, went to my PhD program. And then I waited a couple of years till I got my second master's. And the reason for that is because I wanted to make myself more marketable. But I am a perpetual student. I am always doing workshops and trainings. I'm always learning, getting new certifications and all these different treatment modalities. And I could tell you that if I was independently wealthy, I would be a student. I love learning. Tuesdays, which is today that we're videotaping. Um, I teach. I teach at NYU, and it's a class on mindfulness. And I have to tell you, it is the most inspiring, thrilling thing. I love it. I love being in the classroom. I love, students who are like, again, very hungry for knowledge. It's such a wonderful environment.
So, what is mindfulness? What does it mean?
Uh-huh. That's a big question, and most people get very confused about what it is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because there's a lot of I think misinformation and a lot on the internet and etc. So people get confused between mindfulness and meditative practice. So meditative practice is a type of mindfulness.
Right.
So I do want to say that, right? So there's many, many different ways for practicing mindfulness. And essentially what we're talking about is it's an intentional practice of being in the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. And that's a definition by Jon Kabat-Zinn. He talks about that. He's the father of mindfulness who brought it to the West. Um, but I teach 15 weeks on mindfulness, so it's a big, huge, topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, does it mean, in a way, I'm trying to think about it, does it mean that I'm going to be within myself and contemplate issues or different things that are of importance to me?
No, not really. It has to do with the way our mind is wired.
Okay.
Okay. So our mind physiologically and in terms of our neurocognition, okay, and the structure of our brain, our mind is wired to basically, avoid any danger or discomfort. Okay. So because of that, we definitely are in a space where we're not generally in the present moment. We're usually in the past, which brings upon a lot of anxiety and worry. I'm sorry, the past, which brings on regret, right? The future, which brings on worry, right? Because we could preemptively worry about what if or, something happening. So often there's precipitory anxiety that comes up for us. So we're really never in the here and now. And if you think about it, the only thing that we know is right now. I don't know what's going to happen in a minute from now. I don't know what's going to happen in a year from now. I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years from now. And when we're not in the present moment, we're missing out on life, right? And we have to train our brains because it doesn't naturally gravitate towards the present moment. So we have to make intentional effort to be in the present moment to live a more fulfilling life. So it's kind of skills that I teach in order to, really rewire our brain in some ways. And we see from studies over the years, and these are research-based studies, that what mindfulness and meditative practice actually does is it changes the structure of our brain. It replenishes gray matter in our hypothalamus, which depletes over time as we age. And that affects focusing, it affects memory, it affects impulse control, so many different things. Yeah.
So does that fall into the category of, you have it here, cognitive therapy is part of this, correct?
So cognitive, I do a lot of different types of treatments.
Right.
One type of treatment, which again is very evidence-based, is a cognitive behavioral treatment. And then I also do something called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And that's a more mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy. Basically, the nuance behind it, if I had to kind of dull it down, is basically our thinking affects, our feelings, which then affects our behavior. And we cannot control our thoughts and feelings. The only thing that we have any control over is our behavior.
Right.
So there's a lot of, again, information out there about controlling our thoughts and feelings. It is absolutely impossible to do that. However, we have come in society to believe that we can, and that leads to a lot of suffering and distress, unfortunately.
Right.
What I found really interesting, I have to say, and this is just something I just discovered very recently. There's all these trends, on TikTok and, social media, but something that's came up in the past couple of days, which is so interesting to me, is people want to manifest. If I manifest, my life in a certain direction, it's going to go in that direction. If I, it almost is in some ways, the thinking is if I think a certain way, then I'm going to actually cause it, to happen in some way, magically.
Is that for people that are not happy with what they are doing now and they want to be elsewhere, or they something along those lines? Or?
Could be, or somebody wants to accomplish something like a goal, or they have an objective in their life, right? So like, let's say, if you, kind of manifest appreciation, let's say, right?
Right.
Then it's going to help you because you're going to always think in a gracious way. You're going to have gratitude. That's not necessarily true at all.
Right.
The only way you're going to have gratitude is if you intentionally practice gratitude practice. It's not by thinking about it. Things don't happen by osmosis just because you think about it.
Right.
Just because I think I'm wonderful doesn't mean I am wonderful, right? I have to do wonderful things. So again, there's a lot of like all of these, it's almost people want the easy way out. They want things to come to kind of come up for them in a like kind of an easy way, right? An effortless way. And that's not how life works. Like anything we want important enough, we have to put effort into. And that includes everything.
So people that seek you out for your knowledge and your ability to are people that are exploring other directions. Are they particular age groups mainly, or who are they?
That's a good
and
question.
What are they?
Yeah, I think I would say, and I write my book, but it has to do with stuckness. And it's different for everybody, like
How
I'll
do
give
you
you an
call
example.
it? Stuckness?
Stuckness.
You're
Yeah.
stuck, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. right? And everyone has stuckness. I don't know anyone who doesn't have stuckness, including myself, right? We all have some sort of stuckness where we're trying to accomplish something, or we have a habit that we're trying to cultivate, or we're trying to habit that we're trying to, get rid of, right? There's all different kinds of ways that we're stuck. We could be going through a life transition. There's all different. So, for example, I'll just give you a couple of examples. I'm seeing somebody who's having difficulty in their family relationships. I have somebody I see who has, again, and these are anybody from any age, for that matter, right? I'm seeing another person who's, again, a very, highly, I would say, a professional with a very advanced degree, but he's highly, highly anxious. And he is perseverating in his mind, where he gets a lot of fears that come up. I'm seeing somebody who lost their son due to fentanyl poisoning. I could go on and on. I mean, it really runs the gamut in terms of the type of people that I see. But people really have a lot of distress in their lives and suffering, and we all do to some extent.
Now, what I found interesting about your background is when you talked about your grandparents, all four of them had been exposed to obviously the Second World War and all the awful things that happened during that period, and that stuck with you, although you didn't uh, uh, yourself got involved in it, or you were too young then or not born then, but but it had a sizable impact on you in terms of where you want in your life, and obviously it took you, and then going through a difficult period when your parents divorced at the age of 3, and you went from school to school to school, and it took you till you were 12 or 13 years old and were in grade 6, that you then all of a sudden got direction, likely from teachers or influence that you had, and say, you are precious, who you are smart, and all those things that you didn't really know about until then, that then kind of put you into the direction that you got where you are today, 2 masters and a PhD, and then obviously that you wish to help people that have had trauma or experiences that have adversely affected them. So let me share a little bit with you about myself, that
Sure.
maybe you can see where I'm stuck, or
Yeah.
you feel like that. So this year I'm going to be 84, and I was born in 1940, and I was born in Holland, northeastern part of Holland, through one of the more difficult periods in our lives collectively. As you already know now, that's when Europe was at war, and the German army occupied Holland, and my dad was drafted by the Dutch army. They were just recently married a couple of years before. They had a daughter and a son, and I came around November the 1st, 1940. My dad was called into the army, and the last time they heard from him, he was in Rotterdam just before it got bombed. And for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he was dead or alive. And then things were very, very difficult during that period. I still remember bombers overhead bombing Germany by the Allied forces, and more than 200, 300 planes in the air. And my mother would take us out on the deck behind our house, not to look at the planes, but it was safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we could see the red of the skies and the cities burning, Kiel, Bremen, Hamburg, all those places. And then the most difficult period was the Hunger Winter, and of 1944-45, and there was no food because they had cut off all the food, and it was the coldest winter on record. And and I still remember that now, nearly 80 years later. I can still feel the feeling of hunger. I still have the feeling of cold, immense cold, and I still have this feeling of anxiety. And in fact, I still, even now, still have PTSD. I was affected by the inner child, and the little boy within that never got resolved until I didn't know what it was until well into my 50s. I got counseling for it, very emotional. And so when we were, in 1944-45, my brother, my sister, myself, we would go every morning. We go with gunny bags into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible and burnable. And so the reason that we did is because the Germans wouldn't shoot us, but and they would boot us one maybe, but we'd just be back the following day. So those are all things that are still on my mind in a way. And then the other part is that I was not very successful academically. I failed grade 3, and I always say, nobody fails grade 3. I did, and then I failed grade 7 3 times, and then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? My parents were beautiful people, and so some people said, well, take him to the mentally challenged school, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll have him learn a trade. And my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad worked in the lumber industry, and so they sent me to the furniture factory, and I became a furniture maker. And then the other part that happened to me that was influential is on April the 12th, 1945, we were liberated by the Canadian Army, and it made such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward I would live in Canada, the land of my heroes. I wanted to go when I was 17, they wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years, and then I finally went to Canada when I was 23. But I couldn't speak the language, didn't have a job, and didn't know anybody, but I wanted to start from the bottom up with nothing. And so I left Holland with a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and $150 from Amsterdam to go to British Columbia. And so my dreams were to go to Canada. The second one was to build my own lumber mill, because I said, I'm just as good as the other people. Kids are hard on each other, right? So that all the people that I was friends with in grade 7 and other friends that I had that went on to college and university, I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but I wasn't necessarily. I always liked what I did, and I'm an optimist, and even then, happy-go-lucky guy, but it always deep inside of me, no, I was just as good as the other people could, and I just was not very good at school. And so I was going to prove to me, not to anybody else, that I could do it. So when I left Holland with $150, came to Montreal, took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights, long, big country, and then landed in Vancouver. And fortunately, I met at the immigration department a fellow that spoke German, and I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, Prince George. That's where I am still today, 60 years later. I can still look virtually out of the window here, and it's the Greyhound station where I arrived. In July of 1965, I had 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money several times, and I had exactly $25.47.
Wow.
But I had attitude. I'm always positive. No matter how tough today is, I know it'll be a better day tomorrow. I had then already, I still do that today. passion. Whatever I do, I give it 150%. And work ethic, I work harder than anybody. And
Yeah.
and even now, you see, at nearly 84, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always think I'm late, and I always make my bed. And then every day to me is a challenge, and I do all the stuff that I do. I write books. I've done about four of them, and I have and I'm not here to say, "Hey, John is so successful." That's not the point that I'm making. But since that time, yes, I do have a mill, lumber mill, and probably 8 or 9 different companies in addition to that. I'm an active speaker, and especially for younger people in particular. And then I speak about a number of issues that are important to me. And then I'm a very active podcaster. I love podcasting for all the reasons likely you do. And
Yeah.
so that's who I am. So where does that put me? I'm a happy-go-lucky guy. Oh, the other thing I should mention to you, I'm very much into health and fitness. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. I'm going to show you a picture of one book that I have, and that is this one, Living Young, Dying Old. That's
Love
me,
it.
actually. And
Love it.
and so that's kind of what I do.
Very inspiring. Yes. So, stuckness is in the eyes of the beholder, right? I definitely hear from what you've shared with me is that there's a history of PTSD,
Yeah.
and I imagine that because, right, like those memories that you talked about, which sounds very painful, again, they get integrated into your neural network system and into, right, your nervous system. Right. And sometimes you may get triggered by a memory or a smell or, right, whatever the case is. It's really more about how it's impacting you, right, and not allowing you to live the life you want to be living. And I'm not hearing from what you've shared with me, at least, that that's the case. Like, it sounds to me that although that's present for you and it's something you've worked through, that it doesn't stop you or get in the way of you living your best life.
No.
Right. And I think maybe the opposite, that you have found meaning. Like there's I would actually not refer to it as post-traumatic stress. I would refer to it as post-traumatic growth.
Right.
Right. I
I
think,
agree with that.
yeah, all of your experiences, like mine, and I think that as well, that they've cultivated me into the person I am.
Lay the
Like you.
foundation.
Yes. Yeah. So like, and I think fundamentally, like I could see that in a couple of different ways. So for myself, I'm not fearful, or I don't get bent out of shape when there's adversity, when there's conflict, when there's anger, anything that's kind of right, which does scare most people, that doesn't scare me.
I agree.
I see the purpose of it. And I actually, when my children, for example, get distressed or frustrated, I don't rescue them because I know that there's value in actually working through those feelings.
Yes.
And right. And then you don't develop good coping skills, for example, if you're always rescuing, that's an example.
Don't protect them from life, right?
Yes, exactly. So in those kind of ways, however, I think where I'll speak for myself, because I don't know if this comes up for you, but for me, it definitely did, part of my adaptation, part of my coping when I was younger is to repress. So I did go through a lot of adversity, but I think throughout my life, I did repress my feelings because I had nowhere to put them. There
Right.
wasn't any point to getting upset or to be disappointed because what was I going to do with that? So I just repressed it. So I could very easily, even today, and I feel it in my body when that happens, I could very easily slip into that, where I'll be disappointed or frustrated by somebody's behavior and I'll just kind of literally forget about it as if it didn't happen. And sometimes I have to sit with myself and say, wait, what was that like for you and what happened? And I also have to maybe assert myself or assert my needs or express my needs or whatever the case is. So that's one thing that happens. I think the other thing that happens is there is a little bit of overdrive. you know, um, like, can I be imperfect? And can I just be, and that's something I really work on a lot for myself, because part of what helps my identity and my confidence and seeing myself the way I am is over functioning, right? People see me a certain way and they comment on it. Oh, Michelle, I don't know how you do everything that you do. You're amazing, right? Or you're such a package. I hear that too. You're such a package,
Yeah.
So, like, what would happen if, what if I got, I'm not imperfect, right? Or I'm flawed in some way. And that's something that I do really work on. That I also have to be accepting of, right? And notice and be self compassionate when things aren't perfect or I am not perfect. And also, when you are perfect, you're not relating to other people,
Exactly.
right? Because it takes away from connection and communication. And, you know, so no one wants to be with somebody who's perfect. That's not
No.
even fun.
No. So let me add a few more elements that will maybe help you figuring out this guy. So so even when I was here with my $25.47, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, so I started from the bottom. My dream was to build my own lumber mill. And even as I progressed gradually, because I had a direction where I wanted to go, I became quite successful because of that hard work and commitment and all of those things. And passion, obviously, will lead to success. That's how it goes. But even then, when people said to me, "Oh, you're so successful," I didn't feel that way. I'm still struggling with things that were not resolved for me. And then the other part about it is I was not a very good communicator. That I was a good writer, but that I could have good communication with about 3 or 4 people around my operation. But if it was beyond that, I couldn't until in 1990. A sister-in-law that I had, said to me, "Why don't you go with me to Toastmasters?" I said, "Well, what is that all about?" She said, "Well, they teach you communication skills." And I said, "Are they going to ask me any questions?" She said, "No. You just sit there and watch them." I said, "Okay." So I went down there, and then halfway through the meeting, somebody said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." But I did. I stayed there for 10 years, came all the way to the top in Toastmasters, to the Distinguished Toastmasters, which is the highest level, that probably 450,000 people as we speak are part of Toastmaster clubs, are very helpful in a lot of cases for communication skills, make you better listeners and speaking on your feet and give you confidence. There's probably 10 million people that have participated in Toastmasters around the world and have benefited from it. Probably less than 0.5% of them reached the level of Distinguished Toastmasters, not because they either wanted or didn't want to, but to me it was so critically important that I go there. That changed my life substantially. That was in 1990 to 2000. Now I'm already 55, approaching 60 in 2000. And so another thing that happened to me that kind of puts things together, and you will go probably like click, so is that at one point I walked into a bookstore here. I still don't know why I did it. And I picked up a book. I still don't know why I picked up that book. And the title of the book was Driven to Distraction.
Oh, yeah. I remember that book.
And it written by Dr. Halliwell.
Yeah.
And he wrote that book in 1993. I bought it in 1997. And so as I was standing there in the bookstore, I looked at the book, and it was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." So I wrote in the book in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it, that now I finally know who I am. And so now, what you may find interesting is that the it took me quite a number of times to go through Google and finding out. The more I found out about it, the more I found that then from Google that probably 8% of the population, male, female, across the board, are benefiting from ADHD or a liability, other people would say, or so I'm not one of those. The more I found out about it, the more I know it is a superpower now. But it took me 5 years to go to my doc, who delivered our two daughters, who was a personal friend of mine. And now I was 62, right? So I go to him, and he says to me, "Hey, John, why are you here?" I said, "I think I got ADHD." And so we checked it out. Yeah, I do. So anyway, so the more I got finding out about it, the more I felt I had to speak about it, the more I became convinced it is a superpower. And so then what I did is I felt I had to write about it. So I wrote a book about it, Against ADHD Unlocked, very popular. It's written as from an ADHD point of view. You can go either forward or backward, open the book anywhere you want to, and it's interesting no matter what you do. But it's not only important for those that are affected by ADHD or benefiting from, but also for people that have been affected by trauma or slow learners maybe, or otherwise what I'm saying is now, but you may find interesting, I know you will because I saw your reaction, is Dr. Halliwell has written about 18 books, 5 of them in the Distraction series. I had him on my podcast here, your number 226, 203 is Dr. Halliwell and myself. Can you believe it? So there we are podcasting. So when I said to Dr. Halliwell, so I have a good relationship with him, and I said that, as I said to you, the more I found out about it, the more I believe that at least 20% of the population are ADHD. He said, "No, John, at least 25%. And I agree with him. And then the other part, I said to him that of the successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, the successful ones is the operative, are like at least 50% of them ADHD. He said, "No, John, 75%. And I agree with them. So hence my book. So those particular things, now I'm 62 and I find out I'm ADHD and 50. And so it all of a sudden puts these things together. And now finally I'm at peace with that. Yeah, I'm successful and I have earned it. And now that is gone. And then I didn't quite hear that.
The superpower.
The superpower. And so then I'm so gone from having difficult time interacting from more than 3 people. I'm a keynote speaker and in-demand speaker, and obviously I'm very active in podcasting as well. So it changed my life at that age. So I've written the 4 books and then all the other things, and they say to me now, as they did to you, they say, "Hey, John, how do you do all that stuff?"
Yeah.
I say, "ADHD. That's why." So that's my life, and and
I
then
think for I think for me also, like you're talking about what drove you, but I think for me, seeing my grandparents and recognizing that life is so fleeting, right? And life is so fragile. And like in a blink of an eye, things could change, right? And we see that today. I mean, right, there's so many examples of it, that every moment is to be lived meaningfully. And that is what I really try to abide by. I came up with this model for my book, which is called Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self and Live the Life You Want, which is this book, which,
I like it.
yeah, it
I
came out
like
really.
it. Is that available on all the major medias?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm so excited. I just this week finished the audiobook, and I narrated it myself. So,
And I do the same, you know, and
yeah.
I'll show you my books too before we are finished. And I'm going to send you signed copies of all my books. Now, the other thing that I like what you were saying, Michelle, is that, you know, that I was there during the war.
Mm.
And for those people that believe that the wars, when they're over, everything is back to normal. But it isn't. It may be a generation, sometimes more than that, two and longer. And that's why it is so important to, you know, if you look now in Central Europe and the Ukraine and the Middle East, those kind of places, is war is bad, you know, for there are no winners, there will never be winners, and it should be avoided at all costs. And, you know, and so, you know,
I think that I know that that influences me too. I mean, I was just talking to somebody, and I have to tell you, I don't have any patience, literally, for bitterness and harshness and hatred and negativity. Like, I don't have the bandwidth for it.
right,
Like, I really don't. I'm like, there's so much of that going on outside of here that my life, I need to have stability and love and connection. Like, it's too much.
yeah, yeah,
So it grounds me to some extent because I really do think about that. I think about, you know, again, it's like we're all, I always say we all breathe the same, we all bleed the same. The only thing that divides us is our mind. That's the
exactly.
only thing that divides us.
I agree.
And it's really sad. It's sad.
So what I
Yeah.
usually do now is that, you know, during Liberation Day in particular, Memory Day is November the 11th, and I always make a point of, for the last 10, 12 years, I usually try to get at least 4 schools where I can speak, and about why the 2 minutes of silence, why is so important.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you know, and I believe I have an obligation to do that because there is few around these days that were there and that seen it all, right? You know,
Yeah.
and then the other part that is important to me is probably being somewhat the same because of my background in a sense is like yours, is that you know that I say in particular to young people that every individual is unique, and so many people are so concerned about what they look like, what this is that and the other thing, is saying everyone is unique and special. There's only one of you, you know, and then wear that with
Yeah.
pride and then give back to the community, be nice,
Ab-
be kind and understanding, you know.
Yeah. I used an example in the conclusion of my book, but I talk about how you have a piece of marble, right? And marble's so beautiful,
Yeah,
right? We're all the marble. That's what we are. And each of us, like you, when you carve it, its beauty and its essence is there. It exists, right? All we have to do is carve it. And then again, it turns into this beautiful piece of work and beautiful piece of art. We all have beauty and strengths and uniqueness and worthiness within us, every single person.
exactly.
Sometimes it gets shadowed because of our experiences, because of many different things. And it's really just kind of looking through our essence. And I came up with this model based on my work, which is predicated, ACE stands for acceptance, compassion, and empowerment, which
Okay,
is
yeah, I like
similar to
that. Yeah,
that you use, but I talk about, because we also lose sight of the barriers that keep us from those things. They're around us socioculturally, emotionally, in so many different ways, and that we need to understand what's getting in the way so that we
exactly.
can then integrate it. Yeah, so that we can integrate it.
Now you wrote
Yeah.
an other book as well,
Yeah.
right? If you got a
Yeah.
copy of that book
I do.
handy.
It's called again, very different topic, but it's called Free Your Child from Overeating.
So,
And
so
it's
yeah, sorry.
52 mind body strategies for lifelong health. Again, it's written, for teens and adults, but it could be used by parents, I use it when I work with adults too. It's basically the psychological barriers to health and fitness, health and
Right,
wellness.
right.
Many of the books out there, or most of the books out there, are about nutrition and about exercising, but we
Right.
forget that it's the psychological barriers that really keep us, again, pushing forward.
Mental
Yeah.
health and well-being, right?
Yeah, well, again, when I do workshops, I'll ask people, how many of you have lost weight? And, all the hands will go up. And then I'll say, how many of you have sustained it over time? And the hands go down.
Yeah.
So we understand how to cultivate behavior. We don't know how to maintain behavior.
Right.
And that's true across the board in any kind of habits we're trying to cultivate.
Is that
Yeah.
discipline in a way then, Michelle, or what drives it?
I'm smiling because people say to me, because I eat very clean. I exercise 6 days a week. I've done that for 30 years,
Yeah, me too.
Um, yeah. And people like, oh my goodness, how do you do that? So I say to them, no, I don't have a motivation vein differently than you have. We're both wired the same. People have this idea that they have to be motivated in order to do, and it's the opposite. You get motivation when you do. That's
Right.
when you get the motivation, because then you have the dopamine like fix, and then you connect to your best self, and then you increase your confidence, and then you reap the rewards of whatever you're trying to accomplish. That makes you want to do it more and more.
Right.
1000%. So it's not about motivation. It has nothing to do that. It has nothing to do with drive. It has to do with doing. That's all it is. It's doing.
Now, the other part that I find just off the topic a little bit is that, that I wrote the book. So for many years, people said to me, "Hey, John, you should write a book about all the interesting things that you have done." And so writing books is not easy. And so I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. Obviously, that's what I usually say. So for 20 years, I stopped, and started, stopped, and started. And then as I'm 83, 84, I know if I don't do it now, it will not happen. So, I wrote a book. I will send you a copy of this one, Against All Odds. And it's not about hurrah, hurrah, how successful John is. And it's just the opposite, going through all the ups and downs. And
I love that.
so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And so, and I like it. Now, and then, once you get into it and then see the reward of it, is that it is rewarding to me in terms of being able to do it and leaving that. And a lot of books that I do, I give out for free, actually, but they are quite popular as well. The other part that I found, Michelle, is that I do a lot of presentations, but a lot of times my presentations take so much time for me that, I become more active in podcasting. And so can you imagine now, here we're sitting, and are you in Mount Vernon, New York?
Harrison, which is close. It's about 10 minutes away. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you're sitting in New
Uh-huh.
York. I'm
Uh-huh.
sitting in central British Columbia. We're having a discussion and
Yeah.
developing a friendship between the two of us, and sharing our lives and all the topics around it. And I'm getting to know you well, and the same is mutual. And then at the same time, initially when I started podcasting about 2, 3 years ago, it was not podcasting, it was first blogging, and then something on a local level. And then I have two couches here. The guests were sitting here, I'd be sitting there. And then COVID came, and then saying, what are we going to do now? And saying, well, I have this apartment here, and let's put it in a studio. And then we started to do more on the studio. And then from there on in the last 2 years, we started to go virtual. And now I'm podcasting, as you likely do, around the world. And so now I already know, and you will know, and put it in perspective, is that as you and me having this interesting discussion about our lives and about things in a general sense, at the same time, tens of thousands of people around the world are watching us. That's what makes it
Yep.
so interesting. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just at its beginning, in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Connection. It's about connection, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Michelle, we're approaching your time here. So,
Yeah.
very interesting discussion. It was a privilege to have you on my
Yeah.
show. And I'm
Thank
going to send you the books. I'm going to sign them for you, and we'll send them out in the next day.
you.
Michelle,
It was so
take care.